Welcome to the first episode of Judgement Time. I'm Cornelius Belmont. Let's start this new segment off by looking at Ganondorf, the main villain of the Zelda series. Specifically the Ganondorf that we see in the timeline. I'll be addressing the Ganondorf that we see in Tears of the Kingdom at a later point. The biggest question to ask is Ganondorf misunderstood? Recently I've been seeing some theories about him, all of which trying to paint him in a positive light. While I do like a redemption arc for a vile character, over the course of the game, Ganondorf has done a lot of really rotten things. That being said, could the ends justify the means? Could Ganondorf's end goal justify his behavior? Or is he ultimately a fallen rebel unable to topple the real villain here, the Hyrulean royal family? Let's take a deep dive today and see what we uncover. Thanks for joining me. If you want to see similar content like this, please like and subscribe to the channel. Special thank you to these people for letting me use their assets. Spoilers ahead for the following games. Let's get into it. Let's start off by establishing who Ganondorf is, and what we know about his past before he put his big plan in motion. Ganondorf Dragmire is a Gerudo man, and within the Gerudo culture, that is very rare. About once every 100 years, a single Gerudo male is born, and based on their cultures and customs, they are made king. So, from the start, we have a child born into extreme privilege, with high expectations placed upon him. We don't have a lot of details on his parentage, but we do know that Kotake and Tome are his surrogate mothers. The two Gerudo witches are very powerful, and likely responsible for his training in sorcery. We don't know how rough his life may have been as a child. Surely there are theories floating around about him being taken from his mother, and pushed to cruelty due to the weight of his crown. This, however, isn't stated at all in the games, and so I will not be taking such speculation into account. From what we know, he had two powerful witches as his mothers, both of which he seems to at least remember fondly, or respected enough to engrave their names on his swords by the time of the Wind Waker. It's not very clear how much the Gerudo were involved with the Hyrulean Civil War. What we do know is that the desert people reside on the edge of Hyrule's border. It is my belief that they are outsiders and did not participate in the war. But after the royal family had established their dominance, they would then come to pledge their allegiance to the kingdom. And that leads me to Ganondorf's ultimate goal was to infiltrate the kingdom and take control of the royal family's prized possession, the key to their supremacy, the Triforce. His motives are not directly stated in Ocarina of Time. I'm sure the Wind Waker fans out there are ready to point out that there is a line at the end of that game that shines some light on his behavior. I'll get to that. For now, let's talk about what he did in order to achieve his goal. There was some clear planning that went into learning about the spiritual stones, as they were entrusted to three races: the Gorons, the Zora, and the Kokiri. Perhaps this information was commonplace. After all, it was the entrustment of these stones that led to the end of the Civil War. I'm only speculating on this part, but perhaps such an action was demanded of the royal family in order to disarm the potential use of the Triforce. What is clear is that Ganondorf knew that he needed to gain each of them in order to access the sacred realm, and so his true nature is first revealed. He infected Lord Jabu Jabu of the Zora with a parasite to use as coercion against them, demanding the Zora Sapphire if they wanted to save him. He cut off the food supply of the Gorons and resurrected King Dodongo, trying to bully them into giving him the Goron Ruby. And of course, he placed the death curse on the Great Deku Tree when he refused to hand over the Kokiri Emerald. These three acts are all very heinous in their own right, but what is most telling is when he assaulted Hyrule Castle, attempting to gain the Ocarina of Time. Allow me to be clear, he may have killed the king, the queen, and was likely aiming to kill the young Princess Zelda in order to get this. At best, this was a surgical strike aimed at stealing the royal family's power for his own. At worst, it was outright assassination of his political enemies. He likely would have killed young Link here too, if he didn't already know that the hero was working with Princess Zelda. Even at this stage in the story, Ganondorf's sins are heavy. But he gets considerably worse when we see what he does after he obtains the Triforce of Power. Following the events of Ganondorf entering the Sacred Realm and gaining the Triforce of Power, we see that little of the kingdom is spared from his wrath. Castletown is completely destroyed. He replaces Hyrule Castle with his own, which literally floats above a pool of lava. You know, the type of thing that screams villain. His sins don't stop there. He resurrected the ancient dragon Volgagia, and rounded up the Gorons to feed to it. He completely froze Zora's domain. We can even see some Zoras trapped in the ice. And the Kokiri are all missing with their home overrun with monstrous growth, though this may be a result of the Deku Tree dying. Even still, that is on Ganondorf. In addition to this, we see that he created a phantom of himself to guard the Forest Temple. Beyond this, we know that Ganondorf is hunting Princess Zelda, who is now hiding as Sheik, because he knows she has the Triforce of Wisdom. The worst part of this is, these are all things that he has done after he has effectively won, which makes it really difficult to try and play his advocate. If he truly desired Hyrule for his people, then this comes across as an outright cleansing of the land of his enemies, so the Gerudo people can take over. It gets worse though. The Gerudo people may not have even entirely supported his actions. Nabooru is his second in command and possibly his lover, and yet she is opposed to his actions. This resulted in her getting abducted and brainwashed by Kotake and Tome, as well as revealing that many of the Gerudo soldiers are in fact brainwashed as well. In other words, Ganondorf, or at least Kotake and Tome, are using magic to force soldiers into their war. On a side note, we would see Ganon do this type of thing again in A Link to the Past with Hyrule soldiers. It should go without saying that these are not the actions of a good person, even if he was aiming to take the land for his own people, to enrich their lives, moving them from the harsh desert to the lush, fertile land of the kingdom. His actions seem nothing short than trying to actively wipe out the others. To be clear, we are talking about conquest with mass execution and potentially genocide on the table. If Ganondorf managed to gain the full Triforce, with all of its unlimited wish-granting power, can you imagine how much worse he would be? Ganondorf winning and gaining ultimate power is one thing, but let's look at his actions when such a thing is denied to him. From his perspective, somehow the royal family figured out his scheme and called him on it. This was, of course, a time-traveling boy appeared with both the Triforce of Courage and knowledge of the future, but it can be assumed that Ganondorf was completely ignorant of that fact. All he knew is that while his scheme to get the spiritual stones was in motion, his infiltration of the kingdom had failed. Let's be honest, it doesn't take a master sleuth to put the pieces together. He came to the Gorons and tried to extort their ruby. He demanded the Kokiri Emerald from the Deku Tree with threats of death that he later made good on. And Lord Jabu Jabu had become sick due to a parasite. I haven't even touched on how he tortured and killed the Sharp brothers, probably trying to learn the Song of Time. It could easily be concluded that he was trying to get into the Sacred Realm, though apparently it took a young hero of time showing up, with undeniable proof on his hand, before the kingdom would take action. With his scheme having failed, he and his brainwashed Gerudo army began a war with Hyrule, intent on taking what he wanted. Perhaps he had given up on the Triforce at this point. I doubt it though. The royal family was so concerned about this war that Princess Zelda entrusted the Ocarina of Time to Link for safekeeping, all so the Sacred Realm could not be accessed. At least not until Ganondorf learned of the boy with the Triforce of Courage, who had departed beyond the borders of Hyrule. Ganondorf's intent and actions are clear. He used subterfuge and extortion to try to steal what he wanted. When that failed, he used force to try to take it. and when he failed, he rightfully so, was put down like the warmongering monster he is. It really is a sick joke that the Triforce split initiated by the young hero of time, as a result of being sent back in time by Princess Zelda, would end up putting the Triforce of Power in Ganondorf's hand. You would think that possibility would occur to the royal family and their appointed sages. Perhaps that is why they had the Mirror of Twilight ready to use on that day, just in case. I think it is becoming clear on this channel that the Fallen timeline is my favorite, and perhaps that is because in the times of most strife, we see what people are willing to do at their most desperate. In the case of Ganondorf, he was far from desperate. He had won. Having successfully claimed the pieces of the Triforce from Princess Zelda in the Hero of Time, the great King of Evil had the complete Triforce at his disposal. It is unfortunate that the exact detail of this conflict has never, nor probably will ever, be revealed by Nintendo. However, many inferences can be drawn about it, and some rather spectacular fan portrayals, I might add, such as the one made by RawnLink. I'll link to it in the description. Fan theory aside, what we do know about this is that Ganondorf went out of control, dominated the land, and that led to what is commonly called the Imprisoning War. A group of sages were gathered, all Hylians I might add, who then used their power to seal the great King of Evil away in his corrupted sacred realm, which had morphed into a dark mockery of the real world that would later be called the Dark World. The desperation of the royal family is the key to understanding just how bad Ganondorf was here, because they chose to completely give up on their most prized possession, the Triforce itself. Locking Ganon away with the stolen prize is proof that he was a serious threat beyond the means to kill, and as such the kingdom took a serious blow. I would put forth some speculation here that the lack of Gorons in Hyrule seen throughout the Fallen timeline may be a direct result of his conflict with them. In addition, the changes we see in the Zora, them mostly becoming hostile, could be a result of these events as well. Perhaps Ganon moved to corrupt the splendor of their people, perhaps even killing the late Princess Ruto, who had awakened as a sage. Again, the details of just how terrible Ganon was before being sealed, well, that is a secret only known to those in charge of the series, and I'm afraid they are not talking. Whatever that story is, it is clear that Ganon's actions reflect nothing short of a man who wants to control everything, and these clearly are not the actions of a good man. Come the events of The Wind Waker, we see another side of Ganon who is older, wiser, and has suffered a major defeat. Having been sealed away in his corrupted secret realm at the end of Ocarina of Time, we learn that he stewed there in darkness, building up an army. It is unclear how he managed to break free, but when he did, he continued his acts of conquest with his army while searching for the other two pieces of the Triforce. Similar to the Downfall timeline, the exact details of this are not made clear. The inferences are. The hero never reappeared, and so desperate was the kingdom that a method was made in order to create his successor, perhaps even creating a new Master Sword in the process, and of course the Tower of the Gods to test him. What powered this tower? A piece of the Triforce itself. For the kingdom was so desperate that they chose to cut the Triforce of Wisdom apart. It can be assumed that Ganondorf was winning the conflict. With the desperation and prayers from the kingdom, the Golden Goddesses had to intervene and flooded the land. Ganondorf's ultimate goal was put out of his reach, and so he stewed there for centuries. We can see that reflected in his actions. He is patient, calculating, and has engaged in what every good villain does: build a justification in their minds for their actions. Many of you Wind Waker fans are certainly aware of the line he gives off at the end of the game before trying to rob Link and Zelda of their pieces of the Triforce. How he talks about the desire for the land of Hyrule for his people, his envy. Perhaps viewing the remains of his previous home, the Gerudo Desert, underwater is what led to this melancholic moment. But that is beside the point. One moment of self-reflection behind centuries of misdeeds does not redeem a person. In fact, I'd say he even doubles down, choosing to fight and take the missing pieces by force. While I would like to imagine a path taken here where Ganondorf may realize how terrible he has been, and use his power to try to fix the kingdom he broke, it's clearly not what he wants. He wants the whole Triforce and its absolute power for himself, likely to reshape the world in his image, and we know how ugly of a picture that is. Even in Ganondorf's most regretful moment, he still chooses to be a monster. When his scheme was exposed, his war lost, and at the point of execution, he continued to fight, doing as much damage as he possibly could. And of course, in every situation in which he had a victory, he only continues to be a horrible person. My judgment is that Ganondorf Dragmire is not only not misunderstood, but is well beyond the point of any redemption. Thank you for watching the video. This is a new part of the channel I'm creating, and I'm really interested in your thoughts on it, so please leave a comment below. Moving forward, I plan to switch between the two shows, the Let's Talk About series and Judgement Time. For right now, I'm keeping Judgement Time focused on Zelda characters, but eventually it will expand beyond the franchise. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.